Hi there, it's John Roars here again, St. Andrews with a fifth and final midweek reflection in September on our series Exploring the Bible. So this will wrap us up, and today we'd finish with a personal note. I'll share some of my favorite passages of Scripture, focusing on one in particular, and would love if some of them inspire you, and I'd love to hear some of yours in return. Um, some of the passages I really like and go back to are some passages from the prophets. Isaiah 11, Isaiah 40, Isaiah 58, um, Jeremiah 31. Those are some of my favorites, and I love in the prophets. I love the combination of sort of a lament and a critique, a challenge to the people of Israel and to us, but that is always couched with a vision of hope and a vision of what God is doing and will do for us and with us, always couched in hope. So I love that about the prophets. In the gospel, some of the passages I love are really those that humanize Jesus. I love that story in second chapter in Luke when Jesus is a teenager and disobeys his parents and stays in the temple too long, gets chastised by his mom. I love that story. I love the story in Mark 7 when Jesus is confronted by the Syrophoenician woman, demanding help for she and her daughter, and Jesus at first refuses, but she keeps arguing with him, and then he seemingly changes his mind. And I love that. I love the concept of Jesus reflecting on her words and having that inspire him and to broaden his mission and ministry. The story of Jesus weeping at his friend's death and weeping with Mary and Martha in chapter 11 of John's Gospel. It's a beautiful story. And I love all those passages that humanize Jesus because it helps us relate to him. It helps us kind of read ourselves into his life and into the story, I think. I love the parables that speak of the breadth and depth of God's love. Luke 15 and other places that give that vision of kind of a boundless love. I love that. Some of the passages in Paul that really reflect on the theology of who Jesus was and how we live our lives in response. So Romans 8, Romans 12, 1 Corinthians 12 and 13, 2 Corinthians 5, Philippians chapter 2, beautiful passages. But if I had to pick just one, which I thought I would do, if I had to pick just one passage in the Bible that was really my favorite and the biggest inspiration for me, it would be in the 4th chapter of Luke. And it's when Jesus goes into the synagogue in Nazareth, his hometown, and it's sort of his first public, statement, his first public message that's recorded in that gospel, sort of his mission statement, his coming out message, to help the crowd get a sense of who he is and what he's about and where his life and his teaching will take him. So he walks in and he grabs a scroll from Isaiah, which he often quoted Isaiah. If you want to understand Jesus' life and teaching, you really have to dig into Isaiah because he references it so often. So this passage he chooses is from the 61st chapter of Isaiah, and he quotes it almost directly. So pulls out this scroll, and I'm going to read what he says here. He says, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim release to the captives, the recovery of sight to the blind, to let the oppressed go free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. He rolls up the scroll, and all the eyes in the synagogue are fixed on him, the passage says. And they were all amazed with what he said. And then he said, "Today this scripture has been fulfilled in your hearing." Today this scripture has been fulfilled in your hearing. And it's important to know what the context in which he was referencing. So I mentioned it was from Isaiah 61, but that was actually referencing further back to some earlier passages in the Bible in Deuteronomy and Leviticus, when you get some descriptions of what's called the Jubilee year. And back then there was a tradition with the Israelite people that every 50 years was declared a Jubilee year. And in that year, if people who had debts were forgiven their debts, prisoners were released, land was redistributed, and goods, grains and so forth were redistributed so that everybody had enough. So it was like a fresh start, a clean start on life that was experienced collectively, and that was called the Jubilee year. So that's what this passage comes from. This is a description in Isaiah of the Jubilee year. And so Jesus reads this passage knowing full well that they'll understand that he's talking about the Jubilee. But instead of saying that this is going to be something that happens every 50 years, he says, this scripture is fulfilled in me, in him. As if making it pronouncing it a permanent change, an ongoing change that will just become part of the life of the world through him. He is the Jubilee. It's no longer an abstract concept or year that will happen every so often. He himself is the Jubilee. He is enacting this vision, this dream of God, where prisoners will be released, debts forgiven, everyone will have enough, there will be peace and justice and equality. It's this vision of God's dream for the world, and it's coming to be through him. And the reason I love this passage so much, two reasons. One is it's a great vision for us to live by. I mean, here's how we follow Christ, is by living out this dream, by following the principles and practices and the vision of the Jubilee. And then I also love it because it's not only up to us. It's what God is doing through Jesus's life and death and resurrection, is making manifest this dream. We are participants in it, but it's this always this vision and measure of hope that it is what God is bringing to fruition through Christ and through us. So it is God's work. It is the Spirit at work bringing forth this vision for the world. I find that incredibly hopeful, and really the crux of the good news in the gospel is that this is who Jesus is, who he was and who he is and continues to be lived out through us and in our world. Jesus is the Jubilee. So to me, that's just a beautiful passage that kind of sums it all up. So at Luke 4, I encourage you to look at that one. So thank you again for being along for this journey of exploring the Bible, and I hope you've learned something, and I would love to hear back in return from you what some of your favorite passages are that really feed you and feed your soul. Thanks again for being with us.